Hello, this video is a interview that I did or a conversation that I had with Joshua Taliaferro. Josh is an amazing worship leader and musician who leads the worship team in San Antonio, Texas, a church called Mission Point. We're both a part of the same family of churches called International Churches of Christ. Josh is a millennial and I am a Gen Xer, so we have a generational gap there, but we love to talk to each other. And Josh had initially called me about wanting my thoughts on some of the challenges that he's having with trying to kind of build an eclectic worship approach. And we thought, hey, let's just record the conversation that we have in case others could glean from that. With if you have a diverse congregation, how do you meet the needs of everybody without pandering to everybody, having it still flow? And we end up talking about Joshua's own personal story, which is an amazing story of how he came to faith and the way that arts play into that. We also talk about his ideas about our family of churches and kind of where we've come from and where we're going and the Spirit leading us in all of that. And we end out with just the idea of having fun with what we're doing and enjoying the idea of gift giving, that as worship leaders we get to give gifts to those in our congregation, the gift of worship. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation. If you're involved in worship ministry at all, I know that some of this will resonate with you, or if you're a part of the International Churches of Christ and want to hear our ramblings about what we think about where we're at and what God's doing, I know you'll enjoy this. And if you're not a part of the International Churches of Christ, this would maybe be a little bit of a window into some of our thoughts and where we are in our worship ministry and even in our leadership within our churches as we're looking at the years ahead. So I hope you enjoy this interview. All right. Well, I'm talking with Josh. I still have you as Josh Archer in my contacts, your stage name from your musical theater days. But you probably go by Josh Taliaferro more these days, right?
Yeah, when I went professional as an actor and was booked through an agency and things like that, a big question was, hey, do you really want to go by this crazy last name that no one knows how to pronounce? And it's kind of weird. So I decided my look was less Italian and more just all American. So I went with my middle name, Joshua Archer, which was my grandfather's name as well. And I've always gone by Joshua, Taliaferro or Joshua Archer, but it was just when I moved to New York, it made a lot more sense to just introduce myself to everyone, so there was no confusion. But that was also just, I was like in my, early 20s and things like that. So I was just trying to still find out who am I, things like that. So
yeah,
when I left acting, it was this weird kind of Paul Saul moment. I was like, all right, I guess I'm going back to
okay.
I guess I'm going back to Joshua Taliaferro because it'd be weird to keep introducing myself as Joshua Archer. But that's been years now. It's been years since that. So it's funny that you still have me in your contacts as that.
Yeah.
So
you kind of alluded to it, but tell whoever's watching this a little bit about your spiritual journey, maybe the 3-minute version. Music ties into that because I know music was a part of that too.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. I grew up overseas, grew up in South Africa. My parents were leading the church there up until 2003. And then with the chaos of 2003, they moved to South Texas. And then within a couple of years of that, I think by 2006 or 7, I was 13, and I was baptized and became a Christian. But I, preteen, I really had no idea what was going on in my life. A 7th grader deciding he's going to make Jesus Lord, and he still has never, fallen in love with someone, or he's never experienced what it means to go after dreams or to do this or that. You know what I mean? He's never experienced any kind of temptation. It certainly wasn't, I don't think it was a wrong decision. But it certainly wasn't a truthful one for me, I think, as the years went on. And that wasn't anyone's fault. It was just my own, growing up and making what were seemingly really good decisions. I have no regret on making that decision, of course. That would have been weird for them to say, no, you're not allowed to get baptized or whatever. But anyway, so, a couple of years later, it just wasn't obviously working out. And I didn't want to be a Christian. I didn't want to have to hold to any kind of rules, or, I wanted to date who I wanted to date, do what I wanted to do. So I left my faith and graduated high school, and also left home and moved like as far away as I could to go to college. Didn't want to go to church at all unless I need to ask my parents for money. Then I could tell them, yeah, I went to church, you know what I mean? And so they would send me a check.
Were you trying to pursue like a musical career? You were kind of in shows and stuff. You like, is that what took you to New York, was like the Broadway thing and stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, even in high school, I pursued national ranking in theater and things like that, and was doing programs with celebrities. And so I was kind of making, making the beginnings of what a lot of, people start their career like, kind of in high school when they're super serious about it. And so I went to a small conservatory style training program for music theater. So it was just kind of, those were every class I took, and studied dance, acting, singing, and film and music, all day long for 4 years. And then through that program, you do like a showcase and you book an agent if you can. And so I booked an agent out of LA, and I moved to New York because they were going to represent me on both coasts. And so they said, you're probably better for the New York market in person, and we can submit you online or anything in LA. Soon after that, I started working with Disney abroad. And then I was working with, I did like a national tour. I did some in-city stuff in Manhattan, and some shows in Manhattan, and did some projects and did some recordings. And it was just, I was on a couple of TV sets and did some last, final callbacks. And after my tour, I just started kind of having more of an existential question because, I guess I passed the whole part of my spiritual walk. When I moved to New York, I still wasn't a Christian. And I had been in this, one of your typical collegiate toxic relationship for a non-Christian, and very dependent and very, very toxic. And so but we broke up, and for, all sorts of dramatic reasons. And I moved to New York kind of brokenhearted, but determined. And, I did the whole, like, okay, I moved to New York with a small savings account and just was going to hit the pavement every day, which I was, but I was really lonely, really determined, but very lonely. And one of the days I was walking to an audition, and I had no spiritual thoughts in my mind at all. I was the kind of guy getting drunk, trying to find the next relationship, next person to sleep with, that kind of thing. It was just a very worldly mindset and very selfish ambition, just thinking about myself all the time. And it just this random thought out of nowhere came into my mind. I think it was the Spirit really speaking to me and calling out, and there was just a question of, what are you going to do with your life? Is this really all you want? There's no meaning behind this. And so I was like stunned by that. And a few days later, I was kind of like trying to figure out what that thought was. And a few days later, this girl at the gym that I was, trying to get her number or whatever, and she invited me to church. And I was like, church? Heck no, that's weird. And she was like, no, you'll like it. It's called Hillsong. And I was like, I've never heard of that before.
You had never heard of Hillsong before?
No, I think growing up, like, we didn't talk about other movements or other religious movements when we were kind of the Christian churches. Like, we did not talk about that. And so even in pop culture, I didn't even know about it. I wasn't listening to Christian music or anything like that. And so I went, and they have church in Times Square. It's really cool. This theater in Times Square. And I was floored. I was floored by the people. I was floored by the message. I was floored by the worship. I was just struck that night by the Holy Spirit. Completely moved. And my heart broke that night. I was just so incredibly moved by the story of Jesus. I was moved by the people. Because growing up, I had kind of like under this impression that all religious people are terrible people. They're like conniving, selling snake oil kind of people, And I don't think that was necessarily directed because of anything my parents had told me. It was just, we preach a very strong message in the ICOC. And there's nothing, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we preach a very strong message. And so, the alternative to that message is like, oh, and then everybody else must just be some conniving, evil person. You know what I mean? I just wasn't aware. I just didn't know. So completely broke my heart. I met these people who became my friends. I started kind of studying the Bible with them and going to church services and being broken in worship, hearing incredible preaching. I mean, the best preaching I'd heard up until that point in my life. And I'd heard some amazing preachers, you know what I mean? It was the most moving thing. And the one thing that, of course, didn't add up to me was just the end of the service, that like the 1,000 people who could raise their hand and be saved. I didn't know the answer to that because I'd grown up knowing that was completely false, and really had an abject reaction to that. But after a while, I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to have this reaction, I got to figure out what's going on here. So I started studying the Bible on my own. And then I was going to move to Toronto to work with Disney. And I decided I needed to go back home for a little bit and study the Bible, but I didn't tell anyone that. So I went back home for a couple of weeks and started just reading the Bible with those guys. After a few days, they were stunned. You know, they were like, this guy, what are you talking about? Church and Hillsong and Christian music and worship and trying to write worship. You know, it's just crazy. But it really was the worship that moved me. I'd never seen worship like that. You know what I mean? I'd never seen people raise their hands and like emotionally invest. And it was just like everything in this moment was centered towards Jesus. You know what I mean? I had grown up with not bad worship. I mean, it's great. I mean, everything's culturally different, right? I grew up in Africa where people would dance, and it was just more of a cultural phenomenon. Like people would just dance, and it felt like a kind of like a, it was very cultural. You know, I didn't know any of it was about Jesus. I didn't even know what the words were, you know, when we're singing these songs, but it was just more cultural. It was more of a, you know, it's like when you're walking and you see like something going on at the park and there's a dance going on at the park, you know, you join it because it's this cultural phenomenon of movement, dance, and music. And that's what it felt like growing up. And then, you know, growing up, when I moved to the States, we would sing these songs, and it was only like, I think worship was something very different for me then, because it was like, there's only certain songs that people would actually get excited about. And I never really understood why people were excited. I never really understood why I was excited. You know, people would start singing a song like Wade in the Water, and everyone just gets hyped, but I have no idea why. You know what I mean? Like what's making everyone so excited? Or someone sings the opening lines to the song Men Who Dream, and suddenly everyone just starts screaming. But none of it, something just never clicked with me, that I never felt like any of that focus for me personally was on Jesus. It was just on the cultural moment. And maybe because there wasn't any teaching on it. You know, I never want to rag on our past, but I think it's interesting. I just didn't understand. So then I went to Hillsong, and it just blew my mind. It just blew my mind. I was just, for the first time in my life, I saw that every single moment within the service was focused on the name of Jesus, and the worship was focused on Jesus. And it was just so much epic. It was just epic, you know, and I've never seen epic worship. I mean, we didn't even grow up with a band, you know, it was all a cappella. Yeah. And so, and there's nothing wrong with a cappella either. It's just, it's not, I just never seen epic, you know, incredible worship like that. And so I was floored, and it broke me that you could actually be a musician and be, you know, use your abilities that you've learned in theater and performance and stage and glorify God with it. That it wasn't like you had to sit quietly. You know what I mean? You could rage, you know, and that kind of, you could really bring epicness to your life with God. And I was just completely floored by that. So I soon after, within 2 weeks of that, moving back or going back home for a couple of weeks, I got baptized. And then God blessed me in a really abstract kind of way, because the first year of my Christian walk, I spent abroad on my own. I wasn't
where were you?
Indoctrinated. I was in Toronto, and then I was porting out of Miami, but I was in the Bahamas, and I was working for Disney Cruise Line. So I was
okay.
all over.
So you were singing on the cruise ships.
Yeah, I was performing on Disney cruises, and they paid well. I mean, cruise life is a whole nother, you know, story.
I can imagine that would be a challenge as a disciple, maybe.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. It was interesting. It was a lot like the first 40 days of Jesus's ministry, where he comes in
being tested in the desert.
Exactly. I mean, it was definitely a test of my faith, because there wasn't any campus ministry to rely on. I wasn't in the campus, but there wasn't any singles ministry to rely on. There was just me and my Bible, and was I really committed to this? And I had a lot of temptation. I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of stupid stuff that year. Praise God for his grace and the freedom in his grace. But I think it was just, it was certainly a year of trials and tribulation and learning. But I'm really glad for that year, because I think I wasn't indoctrinated into any kind of strong culture for the ICOC. I was a Christian. I believed in my right faith. I believed in the ICOC and the church. I wasn't really like part of a single church. I was just part of the church. Yeah. And I was on my own. And I was, when I could port and go to church, I'd go to port. I'd go to, you know, when I could make a phone call and connect with a brother, I'd call and I'd connect. And I was really working hard to stay connected, but it certainly tested my faith that it wasn't going to be anyone else's faith that kept me faithful, if that makes sense. Yeah. And that was, I do not wish that upon my worst enemy. That year was definitely a challenge in a lot of ways. I mean, I look back on it fondly now, because, you know, we kind of gloss over the ugly details, but Anyways, I know
Yeah.
that was longer than 3 minutes, but soon after I moved back to New York, and then I started working. I booked a national tour. So then I was gone for a whole other year in US cities. So I got to
Yeah.
go to church in different US cities and meet different really cool people. And I got to see a ton of our churches all across the country, which was really cool. And then after the tour, like about 7 months later, I decided I wanted to really pursue full-time ministry. I was in Manhattan at the time, and they didn't really have the capability of hiring me. And I think the Manhattan church is amazing. I think those are awesome people. It just ended up not being a right fit for me. I feel like I was, what I wanted to do was pursue a place where I could actually run after worship
Mm.
and be on staff to pursue worship. And that wasn't really a thing, there. So I was just, I didn't want to be a campus minister. I didn't want to be like I didn't want to go the route of being an evangelist. Just wasn't for me. And so San Antonio our Mission Point here in San Antonio they offered me a job. So that's why I moved down here and pursued a full-time ministry doing worship. So.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story. And I know a lot of people, you brought up a lot that really connects to what I think a lot of people, some deep stuff. So there's your own spiritual walk, your own spiritual journey. There's kind of worship and you meant, even the experiential aspect of worship. That's a big topic. There's the whole thing of Jesus and what points to Jesus versus what is hype, right? And culture. And you brought in culture. That's a big thing. Congregational involvement. There's just a lot there, that you're talking about that I feel like I could comment on or that is important to people. And like what you said about certain songs. Why are people fired up about certain songs? Or why does it get them excited? I can relate to that sort of journey. Like, and even because music was always important to me and what the words were saying. But I get that there's certain songs that just, there's something about it. I think, like you said, it's cultural. It's just fun. It's a fun song. Even if, there's certain songs that we don't even sing anymore. Like, when I was a teenager, like, Well, My Evangelist, or, certain songs that people get fired up about. It's like, that's a weird song, like, I don't really like what we're even saying with that song but I think it's interesting, to hear your perspective of how God used this. Cause I went through a similar, it's kind of almost opposite. So like, when it comes to my experience of God, it was really more through the word. I think through the word that got to me as a teenager, and hearing, the preaching, the message of discipleship. This is in the 80s, and it was this real call from sort of, just kind of going through the motions, shallow commitment to total commitment. And that's what really got my heart more than any kind of, but the worship, the way that tied into the worship was then that devotion spilling into the way that we would sing, and putting that into the devotion. But then my experience with sort of Christian music, or that's kind of the evangelical Christian world or whatever, was like, I didn't like Christian music. It was kind of sappy and kind of dumb at that time, but I was moved by like U2, like, you know what I mean? Like that was my spiritual place, was like U2 music.
Still one of the best Christian bands.
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of worship leaders my age that was like U2 really influenced them. Like, I know for sure Hillsong, especially early Hillsong, it's just, so I think what they, and being at a U2 concert, it was like, there's something spiritual about it. And so it just feels like it's just this group experience, right? The whole place is having this experience. So I think these worship leaders are like let's take that and let's do that for God, So it's like, it's kind of like, let's make this a sanctuary like a U2 concert, like, and but I had to have my own realize my own cultural baggage too, because in college, I'd studied the Bible with all kinds of people who were coming out of maybe this experiential Christianity. To them was sort of just Sunday, like, their life is whatever their life is during the week, and then and then on Sunday, it's just about sort of purging themselves of all that they feel guilty about in this kind of experiential way, but their life is not having change, right? And so that caused me to have a certain, like, I wouldn't say I felt like all these people are evil or whatever you said, they're sniving or what, I can't remember what the terminology was used, but definitely, like, it's shallow. Like, experiential worship is shallow. Like, that's where I was, like, my own sinful perspective was like that's not real. Like, and again, in the Church of Christ, we come from a tradition of a very intellectual approach to our faith, right? Because, Alexander Campbell was like really influenced by John Locke, and so this real rational kind of modern view of Christianity, like, you can figure it out, and it's all in the text, and what is the Bible saying, and so we just need to follow the Bible and the text. Interestingly, another leader of the Church of Christ movement was Barton Stone, who was a lot more about experiential and stuff. But anyway, I think in general we were kind of almost anti-experiential, and we had to learn to be humble about that. And it's great to experience Jesus. It's great to have, the Bible is full of experiential worship, right? Just read the Psalms or read all of everything that went into the temple was about experience, right? And creating an environment, and even the materials that they used were all highly symbolic. And, the building of the tabernacle, I mean, it's all of it, sounds and smells, and it was all very experiential, right? So I had to realize that that's my own traditional religious baggage that made me sort of anti-experiential. So I had to, this is, probably 20 years ago, but I had to go, like, that's wrong. I need to repent of my own view of worship and learn to raise my hands and learn to, like, it's good to help people experience God, but then, but then we had to wrestle with that in our worship team, because there was people on my team who came out of that tradition, and the experience that you had going to a Hillsong service, they had a similar experience coming to an ICOC service, where it's like, the church that they grew up in, nobody's really singing. It's an awesome performance up front, top notch, amazing, but, like, people aren't really engaged, and it's, nobody's, and then they come to an ICOC service and people are jumping around and every single person is singing and everybody's into it. And, the ground is shaking because everybody's clapping and stomping, and maybe it's weight in the water, but everybody's, really into it. And so that really stirred them. So when I'm trying to introduce these, like, kind of more experiential type music, even I had people on my own worship team that were gonna kind of pushing back because of their cultural stuff. So anyway, I mentioned all that to say it's great to talk to you about your experience, because we all have, like, kind of what we went through that can put a lens on the way that we view certain stuff, right? Or the way that we feel about certain songs, or the way that we feel about certain styles, or what church should look like. And what's cool about the Bible is that it doesn't really prescribe, right? It gives us an example in the Psalms and in the temple worship, and then there's a lot of New Testament passages about what singing to each other and things like, well, not a lot, but a few, about singing to each other and all that, and making music in your heart to God. And so there's principles, but there's not practicals. And so it's always going to be cultural, and it's always going to change, and it's going to be different for every congregation and every country and every time. Right. And so we have to be kind of humble to that. So anyways.
Yeah, I think of a couple things. There's so many rabbit holes here. Even in regards to what, so much of this is going to be generational, and so, and there's so many. I think the three major facets that I would say that strike me as interesting is often our own view of other religious movements, whether they're Pentecostal or Southern Baptist or some of these popular churches of today. Not even just the main popular ones that are releasing more content on the internet, pop culture, that are more influential, even just your regular ones. The people who come to study the Bible with the ICOC people are often not the strongest version of what they view as a strong Christian. They're more on the outer lying, typically, not always. Clearly there's so many outer lying things where like, oh, I was a small group leader. I was up there preaching. I was super involved with my church. It was not just about Sunday for me. Every day of the week, I was a Christian, and I followed the Bible to a T. The only thing that was different was I just didn't know that baptism was salvation. I thought this was, you know what I mean? So often a lot of people come from that background who've come to the ICOC because we've, I don't want to use the word like poached, but we've sought them out in their weakness and brought them into the fold of people who are really to an entire church that's trying to be dedicated. You know what I mean? And at least healthy churches. And so it's often we're able to, as a group, we tend to then transcribe what everyone else's view of like religious worship looks like, because we're actually looking at from the eyes of people who were kind of on the outer line breaks anyways. Like, the person you're describing would be, that the person who just goes to church on a Sunday and doesn't repent about anything during the week and doesn't follow the Bible and doesn't really read it. Well, his or her experience in worship is going to be very different than someone in that same church who's going to be like, no, I follow Jesus with all of my heart. This is what I was taught since I've been growing up. I believe in the gifts of the Spirit. I will not sin. This is not a fake thing. That's a very different person. And so often, because there's so many people within my own church here at Mission Point who I do think just come on Sundays. Like I think the longer I've been in ministry, the more I realize that we're just all messed up people.
That's
and you can't account for a whole church being super healthy. And I think anything's shown us that. COVID has shown us that. And I think, that's the hard part about as we grow as generations, I think learning how to love people, that not everyone is Matthew the tax collector or Zacchaeus. A lot of people are like the young rich man who they really do have everything right. There's just this one thing they can't get over. You know what I mean? Or there's this one thing that we differ on. And so we can't look at their worship so different, you know what I mean? That they're actually this entire almost generational view of experiential worship is actually kind of coming from that thought. In the 1980s and 70s when the ICOC was really getting going and it was starting. There was a huge difference between the weak Christian coming from a religious background going to, wow, there's suddenly this entire group of people, which was great because there was this centralized teaching happening on every ICOC church of like, this is how we worship, which of course, in the long run is going to have its negative impacts as well as positive impacts, of course. You know what I mean? The negative impacts, of course, were that, we move over to Africa and the Africans are told they need to sing English American songs.
Oh no, really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just go back and watch Canon videos. It wasn't a good thing. But the African churches have also grown past that, and they've realized they don't look at no one in Africa. I've talked to them. No one in Africa that I know of as far as leadership looks at back at that in a bad way. They just go, yeah, it was a part of maturing. You know what I mean? The missionaries came over and they kind of told us this is what you need to sing. And they adapted some of the simple songs. Like, it's kind of funny in Africa, they tell my parents now, once my parents left, they're like, yeah, we don't sing that song anymore because that was actually technically like a kindergarten song. That's like a school song. You know what I mean? Like simple songs that like, I think some Americans know within the ICOC, like songs like Ekaya or like Sikuriwana, these like, African songs that people are like, oh, I'm singing ethnic African worship. Over there, they're like, yeah, we don't sing that anymore. That's like a fourth grader song. Like that was never adult worship to us. That's like us singing like in service, Jesus loves me. You'd be like, eventually be like, guys, come on. Like
he's got the whole world in his hands or something like that.
Yeah,
it's a good song maybe, but not for a lot of times. Like
exactly. There's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't, like, we don't want to, that's just a context of cultural misappropriation, you know what I mean? Just not necessarily understanding. And none of them look back at it with negativity. They more look back and like, yeah, no, we grew and we learned just like anyone else would. So it's interesting, I think, with the subject of worship. But I also think what's been on my mind lately is that there's an interesting aspect of centralized leadership that music and we talk about, lately I've caught myself a lot over the last few years talking about worship on an ICOC scale. And I've since stopped asking those questions. And I think there was a couple of different realizations I had that could be construed as negative. And I don't say them as a negative thing. I more just say them as more of like a logical thing. And like, I don't think it has to be negative. Post 03, like pre 03, we had Kit McKean, who was really truly in charge of all things going on at the ICOC, right? And when that broke out, I still don't think that the ICOC truly knows how to move forward in a propelling, compelling, fast track kind of way, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't say that in a negative way. I think that the church is, like you talked about Alexander Campbell and Barton Stone. I wrote a paper on them earlier this year. And the funny thing was that they moved, the Stone Campbell movement moved rapidly fast at first because Stone and Campbell were really at the helm. Mm-hmm. When Stone and Campbell stepped off the helm, that movement fizzled out very quickly and went from what was happening within years, started to move very slowly over the course of decades. Sure. And that doesn't make the movement negative. It just means more spiritual entropy was happening, meaning there wasn't a cattle herder keeping everybody, hey, you got to go this way, you got to go this way, you got to go this way. It was more like, no, let's let the cows sit and talk about where the cows want to go. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Which is just a different type of approach to a society of people. It's not a negative thing. It's a different approach, and it's going to take longer. And it has the potential to be frustrating in different ways versus people can be, you say centralized leadership, and I'm sure 9 out of 10 people go, ooh, like they don't, mm-hmm. they hate the thought of centralized leadership because they've been mistreated by centralized leadership. And I don't think that means that the answer would be to go back to centralized leadership. But it is interesting, I've been in the leaders conferences and I've been there and I would say that things don't get done, but not in this like sappy, I'm feeling angsty kind of way. I'm more just being like, logically speaking, like things aren't necessarily getting done. I think people are staying unified. I think which is great. That's huge, especially for the boomer generation. I think coming out of 2003, they're still fighting for being unified. Millennials, we don't have to fight for that. We want to stay unified. We're trying to figure out just the best ways to do it logically. I don't think we're fighting for unification. I think the boomer generation is, which is not, that's just the battle of the boomer generation. And our battle will soon be upon us if it's not already upon us. You know what I mean? So we all have our own generational battles. And I'd love to hear what you think about that. But I think it's interesting because we're not necessarily have centralized movement. The term movement is a tricky word to use for the ICOC. And that's what I've found lately is that and that's why I guess my point is I don't think we're a movement anymore. I think we're more of a federation. Individual states kind of operating on their own with one ideal kind of thought, right? And we have to fight to go, hey, wait. Can we get unified on this? Can we get unified on that? Which is not necessarily a negative thing, but I think it is the logical thing. I don't think we're a movement because everyone's kind of up, every church within the ICOC can kind of do their own thing. Yeah. And that doesn't make them non-ICOC. I think if they start to branch off from their own beliefs of the ICOC and start teaching things that are not within the ICOC's beliefs of certain type of scriptural dynamics or things like that, eventually I think that whatever region they're a part of course, will respond and say, hey, what are you guys doing? This isn't necessarily one of our core beliefs. And I think in a positive way, they'll talk about things, which I think is cool. But because I think the positive aspects of not being a movement are that everyone can run at their own pace, you know what I mean? Which is really crucial, I think, for local church health, that there's no kind of pressure for San Antonio to look like Dallas. There's no pressure for San Antonio to look like LA. Or like in the past, exactly. A lot of people, we're not sending Bible talk leaders to LA, like the mistakes happened of the past and things like that. And people still need to mourn that in the boomer generation and move on. And we're not doing that. So there's health, of course. There's a really cool dynamic relationship. But let's take a subject like worship. There's no one at the helm to say, hey, guys, in America, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get all the ICOC church worship leaders together and we're going to write new music for this new generation. Because everyone's kind of like, well, hey, we're doing our own thing. Like, not in a negative way, but like, hey, you do you, we're going to do us. I'll see you at the leadership conference. You know what I mean? So that being said, we're not really a movement. So that might be, I don't mean that in like a controversial way. It could sound like a hot button sentence that I want like a headline reaction. Like ICOC, no longer a movement. I don't think it's necessarily negative. I just think it's more maybe just misnomer almost. We used to be a movement because technically a movement is a group of people following one ideal purpose and also following the teachings of someone. Like they're following Barton Stone and Alexander Campbell. They're following Martin Luther King. They're following Mahatma Gandhi. They're following Kip McKee. And we follow Jesus. So we're the movement of Jesus, but that actually just then incorporates us into the worldwide church, the big C church, you know what I mean? And we're just there. And then we're roped in with all the denominations and everyone, because we're all still trying to figure out, what does it really mean to follow Jesus in these kind of ways in these times.
Mm-hmm.
So I think worship gets looped up in there because it's hard to make a change now in anything. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
the ICOC doesn't even have a centralized bank account. You know what I mean? So yeah, I guess I've stopped asking questions about the larger ICOC scale of things because I think I might be aiming at the wrong target.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the actual target that I should be aiming for is the localized target, the local church. What can I do here at Mission Point? So then to narrow that down, and I know I just said a lot, so I'd love to, Moo should probably stop me talking and I can hear your thoughts on that. Because I guess to end off this rant that I'm on is that to narrow it down to my local target of how can I help influence Mission Point? Well, now I have a very specialized group of people. So I have the older than 35, older than 40 generation who views the songs of old as this fond memory of their campus times. Doesn't really regard about the content matter of the songs. It's more about the feeling that the music and the lyrics invoke in them, this nostalgic feeling of like, I remember where I was when I sang that song. I was by the campfire, I was on a singles retreat, and I realized that I had been in sin and we were singing through this song, whatever, fill in the blank song, it doesn't really matter the song, right? And I really, that was such a great moment, or that was such a good time of my life. You know what I mean? And then you have the younger generation who's like, what? No, like none of these songs mean anything to us.
Yeah.
And we want to sing new stuff. Look what that church is doing. We want to sing that song. And then you've got an older generation who doesn't really care. And some people who are like, why are we writing our own stuff? Like, what happened to that? You know what I mean? So there's just this, like, on the local church, I think we have the same problems as the global, like at least the nationwide movement. But I think the best way to approach it is locally,
right,
in my mind.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, you brought up a lot of good stuff.
There's a lot. I'm sorry. I totally.
No. I love talking to you, and I'm similar in that. Literally, I mean, I go so all over the place with my thoughts, and it's all connected, right? And I mean, I think we're both kind of poetic in the way that we think about things or whatever. So we kind of connect it all and see the big picture and all that. And I did a podcast last week, or recorded a podcast last week with a podcast called Space Makers, and it's by some disciples in the ICOC that are kind of spread around, some in Europe, some here, but they're all in their 20s. So they say they call themselves, so they're a little younger than millennials, but they're older than Generation Z. I think they call themselves Zillennials or something like that. But they're talking about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, and the whole idea of Space Makers is to make a space to have these conversations. But they were just asking me about my journey because I'm an old Kingdom kid. We didn't call ourselves Kingdom kids then, but I'm one of just a few families in our churches, kind of that had kids my age, that were growing up in the church. And my family, I experienced sort of our family breaking away from the mainline Church of Christ, and kind of, because we're many, many generations Church of Christ in my, like, 9 generations. But they were asking me about my experience and my journey and kind of some of the stuff that we're talking about with centralized versus decentralized leadership, and a movement versus a family of churches, and some of that. And so we got into a little bit of even some of the sins, I think, of our fellowship of churches, or of our leadership style. I think a bad hermeneutic, a scriptural hermeneutic of a leadership style that was like forceful men from Matthew 11. That was not Jesus. and so God humbled us. But I have a kind of I'm kind of a pessimist, or a little bit in general. Like, I tend to be a little negative, but when it comes to our family of churches and the young people in our churches, I am more of an idealist. Like, I'm positive. Like, I feel so grateful for people like you and people who are younger, who have been patient and not giving up on the fight of like let's stay together. Like you said, like the millennials want, we're going to be unified. We're going to stay together. Like, we're going to figure this out together. And because there has been the people, Generation X, we never kind of got handed the torch in terms of leadership. We were always sort of, like you said, the boomers were, they kind of always had the reins, and we were kind of always, okay, we're under them and learning from them, but we never, it was never passed on to us. But now it's like, okay, now it has to be, because these guys are old. So, so the millennials are stepping up, but so there's been a lot of conversations about that, the generation gap. And we've had a couple Zoom calls that have been great with our leadership team around the world, and talking about this generation gap and stuff. But I'm really hopeful for this, that our churches, that the young people are stepping up, and there is something unique and special about our fellowship of churches. And are we a movement, or are we a federation? Or I agree with what you said. I think neither one of those terms is in the Bible anyways. So I feel like we are the kingdom. We're a part of the kingdom of God. We're the church. We're the saints. We're a holy priesthood. A royal nation. And the Spirit is working through all of that. So I think the centralized versus decentralized tension is there in the scriptures as well. And I think it's a good tension. Like there's things that are happening, and then it's like, oh, we got to come together in Jerusalem and have this conference, because this is what do we do about these Gentiles and all, and so then there's a centralized kind of decision and then sent out, but there's it's messy, right? The New Testament, it's messy. I mean, Paul is constantly having to defend his ministry. Here's like this incredible gifted church builder, but you don't get the sense that, oh, everybody's just on board with Paul. I mean, there's all, it's messy. It's kind of like now, but to me, I like that. It's like, it's better than, this forced conformity or some kind of, what I talked about on the podcast is I think there's always a tendency for us, and throughout scripture, from the beginning to the end, we want to trust in what we can hold on to or control or see or touch, or that's what's the appeal of idolatry, or that's the appeal of, these kings in the historical period of God's people, to try to make a deal with the king of Egypt and he'll protect you, or make a deal with the king of Babylon and he'll protect you, or trust in these horses and chariots of Egypt. And God through the prophets is saying, no, that's your choice. Are you going to trust in the horses and chariots of Egypt, or are you going to trust in me and in my Spirit? But in trusting in God, it always requires us to let go of control, and it's always messy, and it's always like, I don't know how it's going to work out. But I feel hopeful, because I feel like that's the kind of time that we're in. And I feel like it is kind of exciting when you're like, what's the Spirit doing? How is he working? The Spirit has obviously been working in your life, Josh, and in your story, and in even what you're doing now. And so it's exciting to me to kind of go, wow, let's just see what he does and see where he leads us. And the cool thing is, like, you can't put God in a box. You can't say it has to be this way, or this is the way that we always do it, or because that's not how God operates. God is always operating like on the margins, or like the examples you gave of like Zacchaeus, these different people that Jesus would choose, or Simon the Zealot, or, these, God is always working in the margins, or in ways that we didn't expect. Or even Jesus himself in his whole ministry, he wasn't the kind of Messiah that even the most godly people thought. Even John the Baptist is like, wait, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Should we expect someone else? This is not what I thought this would look like, And so, but I think if we don't put so much pressure on ourselves to figure it out, and we just kind of just breathe in and just go, I'm here to serve you, God. And here's my talents, and I'm offering them to you. It's kind of exciting to not have to have the answers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think that's really great. I think that's encouraging to hear you say that. And I think it's because I do ultimately believe the only way for us to have success as a family of churches and is part of the kingdom of God, our neighborhood within the kingdom of God, I think is to believe that we're, to fully give over, to be Spirit led, and I think I think that there are pockets of the ICOC right now that are truly running after that. I want to be Spirit led. I'm going to pray that the Spirit is leading me. And maybe some people are reacting super positively to whatever that instance is, and there's probably some people who would react negatively. They're not even aware that no, actually the Spirit's really leading them that way. So I think the Spirit's gonna ignite in us. There's this really cool analogy that a worship leader was saying at a conference I was watching, and he was saying how really following Christ and magnifying Christ in our life is like it's like when you hold a magnifying glass up to an anthill when you're a kid. What are you doing? You're a little boy. I'm going to burn some ants. You know what I mean? As a joke, right? And he was saying, really, that's because the magnitude and the massive power of the sun, even just the smallest tiny dot, will burn something. When it's magnified. And often when we choose to magnify Christ in our lives, when we choose to follow the Spirit and magnify Christ, it's going to burn as it kind of ignites a fire in us, and as it burns away our pride, as it burns away what's getting in the way, the barriers that are keeping us from following His will. And that burning can feel really uncomfortable, but ultimately, what does it do? It cleanses us and moves us in the right direction to really follow Him. But it's not easy, you know what I mean? So. Yeah, this is a very interesting, as Malcolm Gladwell put, this is the tipping point, I think, of a huge story of at least those who are alive currently within the ICOC. I think, there's the boomer / Gen X, relationship, everything that you were describing, that is very real. And I don't know how that feels, but man, that's real. You know what I mean? And then there's the Gen X boomer relationship to the millennials who are like, hey guys, like we're in our 30s now, it'd be really great to, keep things moving. Yeah. And then now there's the millennials and the Gen Zs, and we don't really even know what to do with them because they're the boomers kids and they're the Gen X's kids. And we're all kind of like scratching our heads. And so it's interesting. I think that there's this massive, like you said, 8 or 9 generations kind of figuring things out. Or you say 8 or 9 generations? It's a lot of generations.
Well, yeah, my family, is 9 generations Church of Christ back to Alexander Campbell. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, so we've got this whole kind of, we're all trying to figure it out, and I've listened to Space Makers. I totally understand their plea, which is like, hey, we want to have these conversations and we want to have a space to really actually express how we feel and to ask questions that are really hard. I respect what they're trying to do. I hope that they do it wisely. And
I think to also comment on what you said earlier about movement versus federation and kind of centralized versus decentralized. What led to our movement of churches was decentralized activity. It was a bubbling up. It wasn't like Kip McKean said, I'm going to get these 30 would-be's in a room and then we're going to build this movement. Like, that's not how it happened. It was God is working. The Spirit is hovering above the waters of chaos. And in the 60s and in the civil rights movement and in hippie movement and in the Jesus movement and in all of these youth movements, all of this stuff that's happening in the world, there's this hunger for young people to do something, to change the world, so there's a lot going on, right? And it's the same at the time of Luther. It's the same, it's not like just Luther just did there was all kinds of this return to the sources thing and this hunger for, you know what I mean? Like, so God is bigger than whatever the one little line that you follow, right? So in the same, it's the same in our family churches. Like, there was a lot going on, and then there's these campus ministries that are growing and multiplying, and incredible things are happening in these campuses, and that's where. So all these leaders from our church, our fellowship churches, came out of that campus activism, and so I really believe we're witnessing another time like that with everything that's happened this last year and a half. I mean, with all of the riots and all of the stuff happening, a year ago, and everything that God is doing something, right? With our youth, God is doing something through the Black Lives Matter movement or the Trump movement, or, like all of these things. Like, God is working in all of that. I believe if we keep pointing to Jesus and the kingdom and kingdom values and the kingdom ethic and the Sermon on the Mount and who Jesus said we are to be in all of this, like God is going to do something. So just like I feel like God did something in the 70s that was really cool. It's a similar time. Like God is totally going to do something. So I agree with you that it is the tipping point. And I'm just excited to be a part of it. And I just want to, do whatever God wants me to do in it and take myself out of it. Cause I have had moments of insecurity, or how do I fit into this? Or, how do the young people view me or my songs, or, seeing I'm like this has been, or I'm like a 50-year-old, it's not, doing music as a 50-year-old is not, it's not an easy space to be because, you're just, you're old, right? But I don't feel old, and I have new musical ideas, and I have new musical things I want to learn. But what helps me is take myself out of it and let go of the desire to control and just trust the Spirit. He's going to do something awesome, and he is doing something awesome. Anyways,
well, I think to touch on all that, I totally agree. And to remark on that, I agree. Like, we are a movement of the Spirit, regardless of whether or not definition wise, like we're following a single person or centralized or uncentralized, or like leadership. Like the movement is the Spirit moving. You know what I mean? So I love how you're saying that, and I agree with that. I feel like I can augment what I was saying before. I can hear you out on that. I actually really agree. Because it's easy. I think I even though I'm fighting this, I have to always focus to not be so ICOC centralized in my mind. Like the ICOC is the movement of God right now, because it's not, and it never had. You know what I mean? Like it never was. It was a movement of God, and it was simply a movement within a greater symphony happening at the same time. And who's to say God isn't working in other movements and other ways and all these other things, regardless of they're religious or not? And I think it's just God is moving. Spirit is moving. And so I think it is easy for me and most likely others to just be very ICOC focused on how God's moving. And so the only way God is moving is right now, here now, with the ICOC, you know what I mean? Which is just not the truth. So it's freeing. It's exhilarating. And I think to remark on what you were saying about it's to be a 50-year-old and be making music, I can understand it because I'm almost 30, and even though that's not old, I feel that, you know what I mean? I feel like there's the 20-year-olds who are in our campus ministries, the stuff they listen to, I'm like, this is garbage, you know what I mean? In my mind, you know what I mean? And I don't hold that against them. I'm not gonna say it to their faces, but there's some stuff that's coming out that I'm like, what is this music? You know what I mean? And I have to fight to be like, wait a second, let me find the joy in all new music that's coming out. Secular music. I'm just talking secular music. Yeah. Because I think it's music is the one thing that if you don't get on board, you become a museum piece. You know what I mean? You're like the big band people, right? Very on
big band is still cool though.
No. That's the thing is I love big band music. I grew up listening to it. My grandparents loved it. They play on their boombox, and I would go over and I'd listen to it. And I grew up listening to all the great hits and to big band music. And when I was in school, I studied jazz and music and pursued that. So I have a love for that, but I'm not your typical millennial who, that's just not the typical story. I'm a music person. So I don't belong in like the rest of the crowd, but it's interesting. The big band people, if you go to a big band concert, that demographic has never changed. It's the same demographic going to see that music. And it's great music. I love that music, and it's the same demographic, because old music doesn't attract new people like that on the masses. You know what I mean? It'll attract your every once in a while new music student who's like, "Whoa, big band music! Wait a second, this is brilliant." Yeah. But that's not everyone, right? Because music is the one thing really, and music and art and things it just continues to move. It's a force of nature that can't be stopped.
And it is very generational. It is like whatever you listened to when you were in high school. You just stay stuck there. I mean, I do like new music, and my kids are 20 and 22, 20 and almost 17. And so I listen to their music, and I enjoy new stuff, but there's something still about that stuff when you were kind of in those high school years that my wife and I a couple years ago went to an OMD concert and they were a big band in the 80s, and it's true. Everybody there was our age, and it was all, and they had like a new album and stuff, but everybody loves the stuff from that time period, 1980,
right.
but
Right.
I want to ask you, so
wrong with that,
yeah,
which is amazing.
that's
only good things.
And if you don't put yourself in it too much, you can enjoy it all. Like it's a banquet.
Exactly.
Like you can enjoy all styles, all generations of different stuff. It's all good stuff. And like I told the girls on the the young women, the young adult women on the Space Makers contest podcast, I told them I'm going to call you guys kids, and it's just because my kids are the same age, but it doesn't mean I don't completely respect you as fully grown adults. But I told them, a lot of these songs that I loved and I still love, they were really, really old when I was young. They're just 200-year-old songs. So that's okay. We can enjoy it all. But I want to ask you about. So you said you were thinking so much about the ICOC music as a whole, and now you want to try to focus more on local and what are you doing locally? And I think that's good. And I think what's cool is, I think during COVID, we've been able to notice a lot more of what the different churches are doing, because people are looking for worship content. And I know we did way more than normal. Be able to see what Broward is doing or Denver is doing. Or I love those videos you sent me of Jakarta and how they made the dance track version of Be With Me, Lord. Is just incredible. That's just so amazing. But I
was literally just listening to that for fun the other day. Like I was just in the car and I just turned it on for fun because it's such a good.
I love it. But so what are you guys learning, or where have you how have you been changing things there? Last I talked to you, you were about to, I think this is before COVID, you were about to break into new geographical areas, right? You were going to break into 3 geographical areas. And I would imagine that probably obviously didn't happen because of the lockdown and stuff. And now are you all back together, the whole church, or did you break into these geographic areas? Because you were talking about having to break your worship team into different teams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This was like maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was. So two years ago, we were starting to talk about, okay, in the future, we're going to break up into geographical areas and what that's going to look like. And then COVID hit, and of course that slowed things down. But if you've ever spoken to my dad, it has to be like a snowstorm that actually really slows that man down. So nothing really slows him down. He's a force to be reckoned with, which can really be frustrating sometimes, and then also really awesome sometimes. So, he gets you both sides of the coin. I love that man. But I think, no, we didn't stop. So we've got a West region now, and we've got a Northeast region, kind of geographically in San Antonio. It just makes sense. And so we have, the way that it breaks down now, actually, as of last week, the first like inaugural service, they had an inaugural service right, like literally March 10th of 2020, like right before COVID, right? They had this inaugural service. And then of course that stopped and everything went decentralized. And so kind of long story short, like when I came on to leading the worship, I was, brand new in the ministry. And so we just started kind of trying to build a team. And then we went from building one team to they were like, hey, we're going to regionalize here in the next couple of years. You need to start building multiple teams. So I started building multiple teams, and I had 2 teams fully staffed, training worship leaders, that kind of stuff, and then as well. And then we started building a 3rd team, and then COVID hit. And so that kind of slowed things down. And now we're up to 4 teams of worship, of full worship teams. So we've got a team in the Northeast. That's a small team. So that's acoustic, cajon, a bass, and potentially a piano player there pretty soon as well. So we're slow moving there, but we're just getting them resources and trying to make sure they're outfitted for success. And then I work very closely with that worship leader, even though, I think you know him, Roland Guerrero. He used to live in LA.
Sounds familiar. I probably do.
He's a bass player. He used to play at the Upside Down Club. He goes way back in LA.
Awesome.
And so, So he's the worship leader out there. So I work closely with him, just monitoring his set lists, making sure that we're having the same, even though we're in a different house of worship, that we're the same culture in San Antonio. You go to one Mission Point service, you're still feeling the same culture. They're not out there doing something that's just totally out from left field. Although I would support that. I just want to know what's going on,
Yeah.
And then we have a West team. We have a West team that we're training up. And they're pretty fully stocked. So I just need to get them a second. I'm working on their second team for the West region. Because my big thing, no matter what, I only allow people to serve twice a month for longevity's sake. So even if it's like, well, the only people who can serve more than twice a month are my female worship leaders, because they're just vocalists and they don't feel overtaxed. And it's what they love to do on a Sunday morning. So they're like, I'll come 3 times a month. And I'm like, that's it. No more. You have to take a week off. But
yeah,
I'm the only person who serves every week.
Okay.
And even then, like I have to take breaks, of course, like anyone else. But that's just because I know that worship is typically something that people can really want to give into and can be overtaxed with. And so even if it ends up being a Sunday where it's just me and the guitar because everyone else needed a week off, I'm fine with that. It's okay. We can suffer in production because of that, but it's worth it to me for longevity's sake, that I've been able to extend the lives of these guys on the worship team where they don't feel overtaxed. They can spend time with their family, they can spend time with their Bible talks, things like that, and still feel a part of the worship team. So we have a worship team in the West, and we're trying to build that. And then we have a fully stocked we're building multiple teams in our college ministries as well, which is really cool because I'm bringing them up and they're doing more Sundays just as our college ministry. And so
that's awesome.
We've baptized music students and they're starting to lead worship in great ways. And then also, and all of these teams know how to utilize click and track. And so the production level, we try to not let it be like, oh, there's my A team and then there's like the college team. You know what I mean? It's like, we really try to be, it's like there's the A team and the college team is right up there. They're fully, that they're there, they're feeling coached and directed and led. So that's been an exciting journey and a very frustrating journey. Because it's not something I want to do. Like my place of comfortability is like build out 5 teams within my region that are really great and make it every week you come to church is going to be great. But once you start having a vision to have smaller churches around the city, it just makes it like, oh, wow, like this is going to be really hard. So
when you talk about the technology, you said click and track. So you're talking about, are you using Ableton and you're using multi-tracks and then along with and you're using in-ears and stuff like that, just in case anybody didn't catch what you're talking about. That's what you're talking about when you talk about click and track, right?
Yes. So we've kind of, I've gone about 3 years ago, we decided we were going to make everything way modern in our church. And if you pull up pictures of our Sunday gatherings, it looks pretty modern. Got like the LED lights and the strips and it's full black background kind of thing. And we try to have a lot of lights and the cameras and that kind of stuff. So we have more of a modern setting with our church, which has had mixed bag of reaction, right? You know what I mean? As we go about it. So we moved a little too fast and we updated our we started teaching a ton of new songs and trying to get current because we weren't singing anything that was like new past like 2013. So our repertoire was at the earliest 7 years old, which is really, really old in today's time. You know what I mean? With the globalization.
Yeah, for young people especially.
Yeah. So we updated everything and now we kind of sing like the top 10 CCLI list kind of songs, which has had recently, which is why I called you, because it had finally kind of caught up to me, a good moment of learning that we moved a little too fast. So there was a negative reaction from the older generation. Not the younger generation, no one really cared. Everyone was on board, but the older generation was like, what the heck is going on? You know what I mean? You got haze, you've got lights, you've got the new songs, you've got the drums, you've got the songs I don't know very well. And so we're doing teaching and we're also slowing down a bit to kind of include and do, versions of older songs. I mean, we always did hymns, like we do all the Shane and Shane versions of stuff. So with all that modern repertoire, the best way to do that modern repertoire and do it well is with click and track. And for anyone listening or watching that doesn't know what that is, any band that you watch nowadays in any setting that's professional is going to have tracked in instruments. Not like it's you never have any band that's creating 100% things live. The big band days are over where everything is being made in the moment.
Yeah.
What they've had a
well, I wouldn't say big band, but I'd say like if you don't have that, so the only way to have certain sounds like side chain, which is like, like certain synth or certain little arpeggiators. And the only way to have that is to do what Josh is saying, you have to have tracks if you want to have a modern sound. If you don't, you're just always gonna, you might sound good, but you're always gonna sound like just older type of music, right? Like Grateful Dead maybe, or and
I love the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, but it's cool, it's kind of jam band music, but it's like, so what you have to determine as a group, what do we want to sound like? And we've done similar thing. We integrated all of that stuff before COVID, and tried to have a mix of all of it. And we certainly do that stuff. I just came from 2 weeks of camp, and so camp is all young kids, and that's all that type of that style. But anyway, so that's what you're talking about, is being able to sound like a newer style band.
Yeah. So which essentially boils down to, on a Sunday morning, what you're hearing is 85% being made live in the moment by an actual musician on stage. And the last 15% is just a bed of sound, things that add and beefing up the sound of the worship team and create a better experience for those who are worshiping. That's kind of our goal. It's the only reason we do it. We want people to feel like they're more engaged. They hear the song on the radio, and then they come to church and they're like, well, this team sucks. Like, it sounds so much better on the radio. We don't want that, right? So we want it to be like, well, they hear the song on the radio, and they come to church and they're like, this sound, I'm not distracted by it. It's exactly what I'm used to. I love this song. Or if we're doing a different arrangement, of course, as well, we still try to do it with as much professionalism. And so what that boils down to, like you were saying, yes, we use Ableton. I know some people use like different types of iPad apps and things like that Multitracks has put out, or Loop Community or things like that. But I personally lean towards Ableton. I taught myself Ableton. I didn't have a background in Ableton, but I basically put a presentation before the board of our church going like, hey, let me show you what the capabilities of this can do to our worship. And I did it as a kind of showcase of it. And they were like, wow, that's amazing. We want that. And so we funded a full kind of turnover to in-ears, and so, everyone has their own mix and things like that, stereo mixes, and we try to have good equipment. And I've bought, there's a really, really great company called Anthem 5, and they make custom in-ear molds. And they're very affordable for churches. So we actually bought, a lot of our team members have custom in-ear molds because we're able to fund that, which is awesome. And gives everyone a really good experience in the band, because going over in-ears can be very confusing for certain people if you've never played with in-ears, and hearing worship that way, being on the stage. But it's created so many blessings for a church. And some of them are, of course, a silent stage. There's no stage monitors that are really loud. We're playing on a full sign stage, which is great. Second is we have a click and a guide in our ear, which is allowing people to know when the chorus is every single time. And so we don't have to look around at the band and go, okay, is everyone ready to start? And kind of like look around, my drummer knows, he cues the track right there. He presses number 1 in Ableton, and the song starts, and the whole band just plays, and there's no distraction, and we just know. And so I'm able to start with a prayer and start talking, and then we just roll straight into the song. And we don't have to have an hour of rehearsal to practice that. Like, no, wait, you started too soon. You started too, you know what I mean? Like, we're able to just play, which is really great, which means I put a lot of work in on my own time to make our Ableton sets available for every week. I can make them. Yeah, it's
a lot of prep work.
Yeah, it is a lot of prep work. But honestly, what had happened is I buy the song and I buy the pack, and then I put in all of my own things into the Ableton, into the master file of that song. And so I add in tempo control. I add in automated lyric changes, so it connects with our Pro Presenter files, and I automate all of our lyric changes, so we don't have anyone operating lyrics at the back table.
Oh yeah, my son's been wanting to do that for a long time, but that's pretty cool. Yeah, you can even do the lights that way, can't you? You can even do your lights. Well. Oh, you do? That's cool.
Yeah, which is great. There's been so many amazing moments in services where it's like we have the most cool lighting cues because it all happened with the click. And I've also run into problems where I sent the wrong MIDI cue because I'm doing a bunch of other things this week. And so I loaded the wrong MIDI cue. A MIDI cue is a computer signal cue that sends from one computer to the other to tell it to perform an action. And so I can send a MIDI cue from Ableton to send it over to this computer, and it tells the ProPresenter, which is the lyric program that most churches use, to do a lyric, or the lighting program that I run, which is going to tell the lighting to do something. And 95% of the time it just works so great and it's amazing and I love it. And there's other times when all the lights just go out because I sent the wrong MIDI cue. And so we're all standing there on stage and it's a blackout, and the guys at the stage are trained to know, hey, like these lighting cues are happening automatically. Joshua has made them ahead of time. And then, so when something goes wrong, they don't always know to fix it. So we're still training in that. You know what I mean? We had a couple of moments, services this year that was just so funny when you look back. And I try to laugh it off. It's fine. It happens.
Yeah.
So,
technology is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing and a curse.
So we've had a lot of success with that. We really love running click and track and Ableton. And I make my own click and track for certain songs. Like if we'll do a hymn or something like an older song, whether it's ICOC, we're doing a lot more of those songs now. So I'm making my own guide cues and click tracks. And I have a friend of mine who's a musician who will send me like, hey, can you send me like a reverbed out tambourine? And so he'll send me out like, you know, and we'll create guiding and bedding of music underneath, you know, Encourage My Soul or something like that, you know, which you wouldn't find that somewhere else. Or I'll do like Shane and Shane versions of the hymns to make it really interesting and fun. And so, yeah, so we now we're trying to grow and not just do modern music. Now we're trying to integrate the old stuff, which is why I called you the other day, because that is such a difficult path to traverse. It is very, very difficult and not my comfort zone.
And do you feel like you're on board with why to do that? Or is it more like, okay, I have to do this? Do you know what I mean? Or do you?
Right.
Because I have an opinion
really
about that,
question.
but I'm curious where you're at with it. Like, is it just like, okay, I'll do this? Because there's things I've done as a worship leader, like kind of like Peter, you know, to Jesus. Not that the leader of the church is Jesus, but like, okay, because you said so, you know.
Right.
Oh, and there's things that I like, okay, no, I'm on board with this. I could see this, you know. Where are you with that?
I think for me, I think that's a really great question. Just to share vulnerably to everyone who's listening, this summer has been a really eye-opening experience for me. And yeah, thanks. Appreciate you putting me through this. No, but this summer, I don't mind sharing. I've been learning a lot about my pride in my heart. And so I think God timed this all out to where within my marriage, within my own personal life, there was a lot of undercover pride, you know, a lot of things that were happening in my life that Satan and my own sinful nature was moving in the shadows of my own life and creating a lot of pride. But it was so hard to see it. I didn't see it. And it took some serious conversations for me to see it. And when I saw it, the scales fell from my eyes, and I spent so many weeks just crying every few days of just all the things that I'd done out of pride. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm learning so many hard lessons. You know what I mean? So God timed that to where all of that pride learning was happening at the same time as, hey, by the way, our congregation feels like we've moved too fast and we've kind of left some people behind. So the answer to your question is, I want to sweep the past under a rug because I don't like it. I have very bad memories of ICOC songs. A lot of people bring memories back to singing ICOC songs that are super positive for them. And for me, it does the opposite effect, right? So on a Sunday morning, I'm fighting those bad memories and going as a sacrifice for my church and as a lesson for as a leader in my church, I'm fighting these bad memories and I'm writing new ones. And that's an exercise in humility and patience for me. So it's it went from the joyful, it's kind of interesting. It went from worship being an act of like, this is all awesome, I love expressing myself in this way, to like 75% of it I'm all about. And then the other 25% is, okay, this is a different act of worship. Like I'm on my knees going, this is what people need. And so I had a long conversation with our leadership going like, I don't feel comfortable with pandering and I don't feel comfortable with pacification. Like, oh, so you're complaining because you don't like any music, so let's pacify you and sing some older songs. I think that's wrong. And I think pacification is wrong. It's kind of weird, right? So we talked about what helped me really feel on board 100% is we're not pacifying and we're not pandering.
Right.
We are extending the hand saying, hey, we're on this together. We honor you. We honor your memories but we need you to honor what's new as well. We need you to honor the new movement and the younger feel and the newer music and the newer way of worship, the more experiential worship, which you were talking about. And We need you to learn that all of it's valid.
Yeah.
Because what we were running into a lot of young people finally going, yes, finally we're doing this stuff and we love it. And like, I don't have to, people would say things like, oh, I don't have to feel insecure about our worship anymore. Like, I feel like you can go to the mega church here in town, come to our worship, and it's not like this huge difference. It's just, it's the same amount of passion and zeal and production level. Like, we're really giving, like, we're showing people that we care about Jesus in this really awesome way. And that was the younger crowd. And the older crowd was like, this is not my church anymore,
Mm-hmm.
which is a bit of a dramatic thing to say. And so, but it comes from an honest place. And so that's been a hard thing to learn, but I've spent a lot of time working on my heart, and I love them. And you know what? They are members of our church, and their opinion is valid. And I think that's what I had to remind myself, is that their opinion matters. And their thoughts matter. And I care about their well-being. And I was convicted, I was kind of rebuked and convicted to remember that I am a minister for the first 20 minutes of the service, and I get to minister to them.
Right.
And as ministers, we don't always get to preach about the things we want to preach about. Some guys want to preach about the tabernacle every day, and they're all about the tabernacle. But it's like, well, we can't just always have lessons on the tabernacle. I know you love that, but we got to talk about, sowing the seed, simple topics that aren't taught, and so I think people who've learned that in that arena have been showing me that this is an opportunity for you to minister to your people and to love them where they're at. But we're also going to teach them that, hey, we're not stopping. We're not slowing down, and we're not stopping. We're going to continue to move forward, because the Bible says to sing a new song. And the natural progression of following that scripture. There's only so many songs that a group of people can keep up with, right? So if I'm continually singing a new song, eventually there will be older songs that will eventually be kicked off, because you have to make way for people to be able to remember the, We can't have a repertoire of 1,000 songs so we can include every single good memory that everybody has. Eventually we mourn the song, we let it go. And maybe we bring it back every once in a while in a cool way. But we still celebrate like the top kind of like the top memories. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's certain songs which I've decided as a worship leader, and I've expressed this, I don't feel good singing. I don't find it to be worshipful. I don't find, we were joking, but like we haven't sung the song in a long time. But songs like "Well Said, My Evangelist."
Yeah.
It's a little culty. You know what I mean?
It is
Just
very.
A little. And so, we made the conscious decision of that song is not for us.
Never to be sung.
Never to be sung again. But people can sing it on their own. I don't mind it, but it's like we just won't lead from the platform with that song. That's not our voice anymore. So
yeah,
it's interesting. So.
Well, I think I really appreciate your vulnerability, and I can relate to dealing with pride, and my son and I did a lesson together for church a couple of weeks ago, and pride was one of the things we were talking about, because we were talking about David and different reasons God chose David and stuff. But one of the things we were talking about, how it's hard when somebody just says you're prideful, because it's like, okay, well, how do I not be prideful? How do I not be prideful? But if I think about being aggressively humble, like, okay, that's something I can do. I can be aggressively humble, which is I can ask advice, I can take input, I can welcome criticism, I can, you know what I mean? Like, there's things I can do to be aggressively humble. I can be vulnerable. I can put my worst foot forward. So that helps to go, okay, how do I be humble in this space? And I think you're right. I think as a worship leader, you are a minister, and we do carry an extra burden of, like, when I go somewhere, like, it's very rare, but if I go somewhere and I have no level of responsibility and I'm just singing, it's amazing. I always cry the whole time, because it's like I'm just free to just think about what I'm singing. And even then my brain is going, oh, we could do that, or what's that going on over there? I see how they did that, or you know what I mean? Like, and I turn that off and just enjoy, because we have this burden of we're leading the church through it all. And it does require us to sacrifice our own, sometimes our own musical ideas, or our own, it's a balance, right? It's not, it can't, you have to be, you can't be just the whole thing is a grind, right? You have to have, but there is some of it that is going to be a grind, kind of like you said with in your teaching ministry. There's going to be some stuff you teach that maybe you don't like to teach or whatever. But and there's some songs that, like, I recognize that for the worship team, for every the same song we've heard 5 or 10 times for every one time the church has heard it or sung it. You know what I mean? Because we practiced it, we've prepared, we've done it in rehearsal, and we typically have a shorter musical attention span. So there are songs that, like, I'm tired of and I would never purposefully listen to on my own. But like when we sing it as a group, the church still loves it, you know, like it's still, right. You know, like we might do This Is Amazing Grace this Sunday. You know, that's a song that I could never hear again and I'd be fine because we sang it enough. You know what I mean? Like, but I know our church still really, I know when we do that song, our church is going to be like so fired up because we haven't done it for like a year and a half, you know, like they're going to be like, right. They're going to be loving that song. So I'm sacrificing my own, you know, and it has great words. It's a great song. It's just, I'm tired of it, you know? So there is that kind of balance of what does the church need versus what do I like? And it helps me to have other musical outlets. So like I do, you know, this other kind of musical stuff under this name, Ties to the Light. I love
Into the Light. Yeah.
Ties to the Light. Yeah. Cause I need other stuff besides just worship to like kind of get some of my musical stuff out. But I think with the fight that you're having of the nostalgia, I totally agree. Like we can't pander to people. It's not a matter of trying to just please everybody. But what I love, what I want to do with our group is like, I want us to showcase our diversity. And I want it to be about that we are a church that's not just this narrow demographic. You know, it's not only a church of millennials, or it's not only a church of white people, or it's not only a church of Black people, or it's, you know, like it's an eclectic group. And so I want to reflect that in our music and on our team. Like we, you know, you watch these worship videos and it's all, you know, a certain age group, or like they all kind of look like they're on a reality TV show. They're all these gorgeous, you know, young people. And it's like, that's just not going to be our team. We're going to have a 60-year-old woman, or we're going to have a, you know, an overweight brother, or, you know, like that's okay. Like to have, I want it to be us. And even the teams, even the groups that we know of that are kind of the most well-known, they have that, you know, that's Bethel stuff, or that's Elevation stuff, or that's Hillsong stuff, or like, you know, they have their own thing. And so like Bethel, there'll be a song that John Mark McMillan writes, but Bethel will do it. And now it's a Bethel song because it's their, you know, like way that Stephanie Gretzinger or whatever her name is, how she sings it. Right. And so like, that's what I like is like, what's the South Bay way that we do this song, or what's the South Bay version of the song there? Not just like, I agree with you that I want it to stand like, it's not embarrassing. It's not cringy, but it doesn't have to be the same exact way that Bethel does it, or the exact same way that Elevation does it, or the exact, like we can have our own take on it, you know, and that's cool, you know, or we can even lean into things that are uniquely us, like our own. You know, we have Betty Collins here and she writes songs, and I obviously write a lot of songs. And so, you know, we have our songs. These are our songs that are cool or new, or our own way of doing it or whatever. So I think it's fun to enjoy all that, but it does take the whole group. You have to talk a lot about it as a church of celebrating diversity. It's not about you and everybody. You know, it's funny because what you said about music earlier, like the new music, everybody has that. They have, this is real music, and they have, that's not even music. Like I remember a few years ago when like Tom Petty was on, he was doing the Super Bowl, and Tom Petty, I came to Tom Petty kind of late. Like I saw him in concert with another brother who took me along. And then when I saw him in concert and I heard all, you know, I was just like, I was sold. I was like, this guy writes such catchy, awesome songs. Like, and then, but I didn't like it necessarily when they came out, but I liked it later. And I will go to my grave loving Tom Petty. I just love his songwriting. It's simple 3-chord songs, but I just love it. I love, you know, but he was the Super Bowl act. And we had a bunch of people over for Super Bowl, and this one brother was just going on and on and on about how horrible he was, and that is not music. Who thinks that's music? How did this guy get to do the Super Bowl? So everybody has that, their thing that they hate or their thing that they love. And so, but it helps to talk as a church about that, like just as strongly as you feel about this, these guys feel just as strongly about that. So, we're all together in this, and it's a harder job now than when it was just a cappella, because then it was just either faster, slower, louder, softer. The style variant wasn't nearly as broad as it is now, when you incorporate all that we can incorporate. So it's a worthy battle, but I appreciate how you're wrestling through it and talking as with your church leadership about it. And I just appreciate your willingness to wrestle through it, and I think it is a worthy battle,
Yeah. And I think I appreciate you sharing kind of what you guys are doing. And that's really great to glean from that wisdom. Like we are going to be an eclectic group, and we need to celebrate that. Which brings me to my other question, which is, I think that the reason why this is my big question. So, and this is what I kind of asked you the other day and alluded towards. Like the reason why the popular groups of today, they've leaned into what they do, right? Mm-hmm. And to a specific style of culture, and like, guys, this is the sound of our church. And now people know, you go to Bethany, you go to, Hillsong, you go to Elevation, or if you go to Maverick City or whatever, like this is their style. And it would be weird if you walked in and started complaining, why aren't you doing this style? Like, it's like, well, this is what they do. You know what I mean? Like this is like, no one says that, right? No one's complaining about them not doing, you know what I mean? Even though I think actually Elevation and Maverick City have done like really brand new stuff that just like doesn't sound like them at all, which is really interesting. But because you know what style they are, you go in ready to just, okay, this is how it's going to sound, right? And so, but then with us, what you get is just all this different style of culture, and everyone wants a seat at the table, which isn't a bad thing. It's just, it is something to navigate. You know what I mean? Everyone wants their music at the table. So whose voices do we listen to? What do we say, hey, look, that music is awesome, but we're going to go in a different direction? Or what music do we say, no, you know what, we're going to celebrate that, and we're going to do that. But then my big question is, okay, but musically speaking, if you went to a big band concert, and we keep talking about this, and the big band concert was halfway through the set of big band classic music, and then we're going to suddenly do ZZ Top.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and then after ZZ Top, we're going to do the big band song, and then we're actually going to do some U2.
Yeah.
Like as an onlooker and as a participant in that, like it feels like we're driving stick for the first time. You know what I mean? Like we're just so how do I, as a worship leader and as a steward of the music culture at Mission Point, celebrate these different styles without making a service that just feels like I'm pandering to pander, like I'm just doing these songs because they have to be in the set or someone's going to complain? Does that make sense? Yeah. So me as a worship leader, I can celebrate the lyrics and I can celebrate the music, but musically these songs do not fit together.
Right.
And
right.
Sometimes they really work together. Right. So I can go from this last week, we went from Graves into Gardens, and we went in such a great song, right? Mm-hmm. Love that song. Such a powerful anthem. And I had so we sing a song by We the Kingdom called Holy Water. Right.
I know that song.
Such a great song as well.
I got a new song that has the same groove as Holy Water, but it has I heard that groove was in my head, and I wrote a new song, so I got to share it with you. I'll send it to you.
Oh, please do.
Yeah.
Well, that groove is hilarious.
I love the groove. It's a great groove. It's like an old deep DCG, South groove.
Exactly. DCG is the same, like that's Sweet Home Alabama. Mm-hmm. That's I'm a cowboy.
Yeah.
Steel horse I ride. It's the same chord progression, right? So we were laughing as a team. We were like, what if we just went into Dead or Alive? Just see what people would say. Like just the musical aspect of it, not the lyrics. That's such a great group. But anyway, so I was trying to figure out Okay, so this is a good example of this service. We start off with a song by Passion, Shout Hosanna. Very simple. Shout Hosanna, Jesus, he saves. We sing a lot of Passion. We like Passion. We went into Graves into Gardens, kind of our anthem, and then we were going to end off that set with Revelation song. We were going to do a quick reading prayer, go into Revelation song. We were doing more. This was more of a, wasn't full on everything synth and electrics and things like that. It was a little bit more like, it was a couple of acoustics. It was a keyboard doing different sounds, bass player, cajon. So it wasn't like this full on thing, right? And then at the end of the service, we were going to do Holy Water. And so then I got an email, hey, just remember we need to incorporate a 90s song. So I was like, great. I know we've been working on this. I actually didn't make the set list that day. I let another worship leader make it. And so I reminded him, hey, we need to incorporate a 90s song. He was like, great. Can you just get an example? And I was like, and I emailed leadership and I said, what would you like us to sing? And they said, they came back with, let your living water flow over my soul.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Such an old song, and it's gorgeous. It's a beautiful song. Yeah. Where the heck does that fit in that to make it feel like it flows, right? Because only a cappella, it's going to hit a huge e-break on the service. So what do I do? So I was thinking, oh, I've got an idea. We'll do Holy Water at the end of the service. But that song is let your living water flow over my soul, singing Jesus. And I was like, that's great. And then it'll go, don't, right? And go straight into Holy Water. I was like, oh, this is great. And they were like, no. They're like, cool idea, but we want to make sure that people understand that this is not a song that's flowing into another. This song has its own place. We are celebrating 90s music.
Who is saying this? Who is giving you that feedback? The kind of church leadership folks that you're talking about?
Yeah, core team of evangelists.
Okay. Saying,
no, we want to make sure people see loud and clear that we're doing 90s music and they have nothing to complain about. This is kind of where we're at right now. And I want to be a team player. So I was like, I was trying to explain like, okay, well, this is my idea. I'm trying to integrate it, make it cool, make it fresh. And they were like, we don't need to make it fresh. We should need to do it. And I was like, okay. And this is where the question came up of like, that's just a huge e-break on like developing it as a music piece. Yeah. And more just doing it to do it. And I was like, but we got to find a way to celebrate it. So it's got to be organic. It's got to be real. So I was like, okay, I guess we'll just do it right before Revelation song as an a cappella song. And it felt like an e-break on the service. Yeah. But people sang and I was super encouraged. So it wasn't like people just felt like, what the heck are you doing? I just tried to integrate it. And I did it with a pad. I cheated. We didn't do it a cappella. I did it with a pad.
Yeah. That doesn't count too much. Smooths it out.
Sure. But we went from Graves into Gardens and a D, the key of D came in through a pad and I just started singing it. And people just sang with me. And then we went straight into worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Right?
Yeah, so that's beautiful.
Straight into that. And it worked, but it didn't. Like it felt like, let's pump a break here and do a 90s song. So my question is, how do I avoid that? But still, that at the end of the year, the congregation goes, no, you know what? We did celebrate our 90s heritage. I don't feel left behind. And I see the importance of it. And I see that we're moving forward. We've taught new songs because we've written about 3 songs as a group this year.
I love that. Remind me, I want to talk to you about that All Hail King Jesus song you sent me. I love it. I'll talk to you about that after.
Oh, great. We've worked on it even since I sent it to you. We've actually talked about a verse 2 and kind of worked on musically. I'm actually getting in the studio, hopefully, to do a scratch track to at least get started on that song to figure out things. But but there's not really a way to do new music if our congregation isn't on board with the worship team in general, right? I don't want to start doing, hey, we've written some new songs, but we're all kind of disagreeing on worship right now anyways. You know what I mean? I'm trying to get everyone unified before we release any of that stuff. So my question is, how do I fight for unity without pulling e-break on services for diversity's sake? You know what I mean? I want to celebrate the diversity. I don't want to just pander,
Right.
Those are my big questions.
So I think you bring up some really, really great questions and it is an art form. It is absolutely an art form. And I've had a hard time even teaching it because I've tried to hand off the worship planning sometimes. And then it's easy if they're all the same style, right? If it's all the same style of music, it's going to flow naturally. And it's not, maybe, then it's just a question of maybe theme but if you're talking about different styles, that is really difficult. And it is an art form and there's times that we do something that didn't work and it doesn't work. But I think it's because of where I came from, like I've had to learn. I've been doing that for exactly what you said for 20 years. You know what I mean? Like like
Right.
because of kind of the culture of our church, the LA Church of Christ, even, you know, for our all LA services or even conferences, you know, just having to deal with a big group that is all these styles. So I have spent a lot of time on that kind of stuff, and I've seen what works and what doesn't. So I've definitely experienced what you're talking about. And I think the big band example is a good one. You don't want that, you know, where it's just too disparate, but you also don't want to have, like, one of our conferences, one of the suggestions was like this opening night that's just all the kind of new cool stuff that we all like. And then this next night, you know, that's a cappella night, and it's just all those old acapella songs. And then this night is all gospel, and it's just only gospel. And I didn't want to do that, but at least at that time at that conference, because I didn't want it to feel like we're these pockets of people like that, you know, oh, now this is for us, or no, now this is for us. So I preferred something that each of them, maybe one of them was a little more that style, but they, you know, but it didn't feel like, oh, that's the acapella night, or, you know, whatever. So it is hard. It is, I mean, if just off the top of my head, I like your idea of the Into the Holy Water. That's great. I probably would have opened with it. Like I would have probably opened with, because once you get the band going, you know, you need a flow, right? You can't, your flow is going to either be, you know, you're ramping up and then you drop down into communion, or you're ramping up and then you stay up and then you're going into this sermon, or, you know what I mean? You need an overall flow. And so I'm thinking in terms of kind of the arc of the energy and even hearing the voice of the church through it all. And so I would like the idea of starting with Let Your Living Water flow. You know, if it depends on each congregation, you know, because some congregations are used to being pulled in by high energy worship, and so they're just going to be talking. So in that case, you would have to kind of get them quiet and read a scripture or talk for a minute before you go into it, and then go into Let Your Living Water flow, and you're going into Holy Spirit, or you're going into something that's all about listening to God and learning from God, or what, you know, or a revelation song or whatever, and then maybe go into Graves. And like I would like the flow of Let Your Living Water into Revelation song, so you're kind of in the presence of God, and then ending out on Graves in the Garden. So it's just, what does God do in our lives, you know? But that's that arc, you know, of your ending up. But I think just I spent a lot of time thinking about, how does this feel? How does this transition feel like that? I mean, years ago, I would spend sometimes 4 hours just on the flow of the service, because it was what you said. It's like, how do I incorporate, like, Rise Up, O Men of God? There's no way to put Rise Up, O Men of God into a worship flow. You know, you just can't. It has to just be its own. It's an awesome song. It just has to be its own thing. It has to be a standalone thing.
Slap a beat and a rap into that song and you're golden.
It has to be its. So, but I would spend a lot of time like, okay, as this song ends and we're going to the next one, how does it feel? Because it is a different skill, and it's more work for sure than a bunch of contemporary songs, because those automatically kind of, and then it's just a matter, how do we get from this key to that, or how do we, do you know what I mean? So it is.
And a big reason behind that is a lot of those people, like you were saying, grew up listening to U2 and a lot of the same music. A lot of the guys who are writing songs now grew up listening to the same music. So all of it is going to flow, even though they all sound different, they all flow really well together, because it's kind of coming from the same musical background.
There's a certain, which is really interesting. It's funny how you can hear a song and you haven't heard a single lyric yet, but you know it's a worship song, you know. You know what I mean?
Right.
Certain, it's because it's got the pads, it's got the electric guitar with the delay on it, it's got a certain vibe. And there's newer styles now too, but you know, that bring in the side chain and the synths and the newer, but those are still 80s sounds, some of them, you know, some of the 80s cool sounds. But I mean, all I can say is that I just affirm that it is hard. You know, I think it's trial and error, but I just like the idea of everything's an experiment. There's no right or wrong. And, you know, and then definitely spending some time thinking about it, not just throwing it together, but thinking about, how does this feel when this is ending? What's our congregational feel? And
Yeah.
You can definitely pull in some stuff that's just because, even in a big song, like we did, it's not a newer song now, but Cornerstone this last weekend, and it has really big moments, and then it drops out, and you just hear the voices. And so a lot of, most of the newer songs are made like that. They have the dropouts, but in those dropouts you can put, I know Jay Minor does that a lot, puts like a hymn in there or some older song in there, that's kind of in the midst of that dropout, and then you bring it back or whatever. But I mean, I think the thing for me that's important is to look at it as fun rather than a pain in the butt. So that's why I asked you the question at the beginning about how are you feeling about it? Like, view it as fun. This is fun. I want it. This is a challenge because, if it's the same, it would be a challenge, same musical challenge if you were a showrunner, or if you were a musical director, what do they call it? The guy that picks all the music for a movie or whatever. Like, you still have these same challenges. Maybe some of them are stuff you like, some of you don't. So it's like, but let's enjoy the challenge. Like, let's enjoy the art of it,
Yeah, and I really appreciate that reminder. And that's very humbling of me to remember that there is a challenge in this. This is a part of growing as a worship leader. This isn't a negative lesson. This is a real positive lesson. Yeah, and I think that's really good for me to remember that. So I really appreciate that.
And you're ministering to those people. So enjoy serving this up for them. Like, this is going to be fun. They're going to love it. It's like giving a gift, it might not be something you wanted, but that's not the point of a gift. It's the point is they're going to love it. And so it's like, I have to do this. I have to do this dumb song. It's like, oh, this is going to be so fun, when we do this and watching them just.
That is a great analogy for being a worship leader. Like, you always know when you go to a birthday party or Christmas when someone got something for someone because they love it, not because they actually thought the other person would enjoy it. Like, sometimes my dad has got me like a book because he loved it and he's just certain you're going to love it. And sometimes that goes off. And sometimes that really works. Like, that was an amazing
That's so
book
true. Yeah. I have totally gotten that shirt from that brother that looks just like all the shirts that brother wears.
Yes,
I would never wear that shirt.
Right. And sometimes that works. Sometimes it's like, you know what, I'm going to wear this shirt because I'm going to celebrate my friendship with that brother. Or it's like, you know what, I'm never going to wear this shirt. And you really shouldn't have got me that. That was kind of weird.
That's right.
But it's a great aspect of leading worship. That's a great thing because it comes from a genuine place. Not that, gift giving because you love something is a bad thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think it's how you give it and the intention behind give it of like. So I appreciate that. And I think, we'll see. I'm really interested to see how the next 6 months go.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see how that goes. Because, I mean, right, like any worship leader. So, well, not everyone does this, but I plan all my sets out about 3 months ahead of time, right? And so I get my band enough time to practice and have all the rehearsal tracks up on play.
That's amazing. So you're planning songs right now that are 3 months from now?
Well, not today. But the summer was so strange with all these talks and e-breaks that I kind of erased all the work I was doing because I was like, none of this is going in line with what we're thinking, right? Because I was teaching a new song every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so we taught a lot of new songs already this year. So I'm deciding to double back and to make sure that the teaching on those songs stuck and that people understand why we sing these songs. So we're slowing down on the teaching of the new songs. I had 20 something songs or something like that I was going to teach this year to the church, right? To kind of catch us up to CCLI's top 10 and make sure that we're seeing stuff that's current. And I've slowed down that. I'm like, okay, if it ends up being 12, I'm okay. You know what I mean? Like, or if it ends up being 15, like, that's fine. Or if it ends up being, I've already taught 12. So if it ends up being, whatever it ends up being, that's fine. But yes, historically what I do is I sit down in January and I plan all the way through March. Essentially, I plan to every major holiday because whatever I do to plan for a holiday, it always gets screwed up because people are out of town. So I can plan for whatever, but I have to wait until I actually know who's going to be there for that service, And so then I'll plan for March. I'll plan my huge Easter service way ahead of time. And then I'll plan all the way to the beginning of summer, but then everyone leaves for the summer. So I'm not going to plan anything until I know what my team is for the summer. And they have all their blackout dates. Like every 3 months, I remind my team to put their blackout dates in the planning center. And then I plan all the summer usually. But summer's usually really tentative and everything changes and nothing sticks. And it's just really, it's like, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? It's like I paint a whole painting and then someone comes and gives me a new canvas to start over. You know what I mean? So it's always been that way. So that's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm sitting down now. I'm going to plan the rest of August. I'm going on vacation. So I might wait to go. I'll probably do it this week. I'll plan the rest of August because I already had the rest of August planned. But that was the extent of my planning. And then I'll sit down this week or next week and plan September, October, November. I'll plan all three. And then I wait until October where I plan the whole Christmas season because I have to plan for what's our big Christmas service going to include. You know what I mean? Where's it going to be? What's it going to look like? We always do this like Riverwalk service that gets it's our most attended service, you know, a church of almost 600 and we have 1,300 people come to it. So it's a huge service. Yeah. And it's in the Riverwalk area. It's really nice. Candlelit Christmas service. So I have to plan way ahead of time for that. So we have a jazz band on one side of the river. We have a huge band. We do all the big stuff like King and Country's Drummer Boy, all the big stuff that's like massive Christmas songs, Here Comes Heaven. And then we do the Christmas carols, you know, choir like, and so it's huge, but there's always new songs that I want to teach for the Christmas season to update our Christmas repertoire. And like any worship leader, we all hate Christmas because it's like, we suddenly go into overdrive and we don't even get to enjoy it. And you're just
that's right. Just like, it's true.
Christmas. You know what I mean?
Finally, it's December 22nd and you're done with everything. And it's like, you haven't bought a single Christmas present. You haven't written a single Christmas card. Yeah.
All of my Christmas enjoyment is secular music. I just enjoy the secular Christmas stuff and the Christian stuff. I'm so overwhelmed with that. I have to just like kind of distance myself from it. But I do love some of the new stuff that we get to teach each year, which keeps me feeling fresh. You know, we'll do like Hillsong Young and Free's version of Noel, or, you know, things like that like King and Country, things like that. But anyway, so that's how I plan everything. And then within that, I integrate my new songs and I'll lead up to these new songs. Like, why are we doing this set list? Because if I'm going to teach, you know, one of the songs I'm going to teach this fall, there's a song that came out a while ago, which I haven't taught it yet, Highlands by Hillsong. And I love that song, which I haven't taught it yet. And I have this whole Spotify playlist that my whole team listens to that all our new stuff, you know, so there's a lot of new stuff I need to teach that we've, you know, gotten behind on. Just a lot of cool stuff that's coming out that we're excited to teach. But we're pressing pause, and we might not do any of those new songs. We might just do only stuff that we wrote and do a whole fall of stuff that we wrote. So, but I got to make all those set lists, and what it does is it allows my team. Then I can assign all of my 4 different worship teams. They all know what songs are being done. I know what keyboard. So first I assign my teams and then I assign my set list. So like if I know I've got the great keyboardist on that day, let's do some keys heavy stuff. That's going to be awesome.
Right. Exactly.
You know, that kind of stuff. So that's how I plan.
That's cool. So yeah, I can relate to that. I think and I forgot to comment on this when you were talking about the style, like nobody says, hey, how come Bethel is this way? Because that's the Bethel style, or that's the elevation style, or that's the whatever.
Yeah.
Like I love our church in Austin. I love their style. Like that's my favorite style. It's kind of like not country, but a little bit folky and like pads and like it's kind of quiet and like, especially that's like the Austin music that that our church does in Austin with Emily and them. Like that's my favorite. That's like my favorite style. But I think you kind of land on, I think you become your own, as long as you're not a slave to it. It has to be a certain way. Like that's what I feel like. I want to lean into what we're good at, and it does start for me with the team. Who do I have? You know, who's here? Because everybody has. You want to, like, if you're a good worship director, worship leader, versus worship director, you're going to be pushing people into their sweet spots, but always also calling them to continue to develop. So like Tony Martin, for example, who's a good friend of mine for many years, he's so amazing at that, is knowing what people's gifts are and then like putting them in that space to shine, but also like helping them kind of keep growing. So you kind of push their comfort zone by like maybe calling them to do some stuff that's not as natural to them, but it's not going to be bad, but they're just still stretching a little bit. So, but for sure you want to start with leaning into your strengths. So I think, so that's another part of the art form, is going, okay, who do I have? And what are those 90s songs I want to incorporate? And then what's the vibe of that service going to be? And there, it might not work like that. that night, it might not work to put the 90s song in that week. You might have to do it the next week when you have a different team or different, but because there's certain people, it's like for me, I have a keyboard player he's like this jazz piano player. He's amazing, incredible chops, but he has the hardest time with like remembering the riff for Build My Life, like on the bridge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's too simple, right? Or
like
the little
notes,
riff, or the same thing on like Beautiful Name, that little descending riff, like, or like just simple things are hard for him because he's just this jazz pianist and it just flows out of him. So it's always, and most contemporary Christian music is very simple piano parts. It's a lot of stuff is like, you have to take one hand away. And like if I'm playing piano, certain parts, I have to just make myself use one hand or it's going to be too busy. And so we all have this ongoing conversation, and he's very open to it about trying to learn to play more simply and stuff. But I still know like there's certain songs that I need to play. I need to play the keys on that song, or that weekend if we're going to do that song. But then let's lean into a song that he can just go for it. Like there's this song and I keep thinking of Wade in the Water. It's not Wade in the Water. It's Jesus Done Sign My Name. You know that song? Done sign my name. What's the beginning of it? Oh, I've been changed. I know I've been changed. It's an old gospel song. I know I've been changed. I know I've been changed. The angels in heaven done sign my name. So it's one of those like minor key, rootsy vibes.
Yeah.
That we, or Holy Perfect Always Forever is a song that Ross Lippincott from New York wrote. It's a minor key. Like our church is like that minor key kind of gospel-y, old gospel-y. So I know I've been changed as that beat, like so this guy Mark, he just shreds on that song because he can play organ and just go nuts on it, so let's give him that and just say go. Like when we had our Easter services, like that's the one song I was like, okay, all the brakes are off and he just goes nuts, but so I think a lot of it is what I'm saying is your style of who you are, like whoever's listening to this, like your team, you'll develop your own style naturally by who you have, like who you like. My roommate in college was a clarinet player, and he's an amazing clarinet player. And we had this rock band that we played for all these events and stuff. And we actually won the University of Colorado Boulder Battle of the Bands, and we were playing all these like songs that were cool at that time. But we had a clarinet player in our rock band, because and it was really cool because it was different. And it was like, and sometimes he would play other stuff. He played cowbell too, but so I think that will define you. If you have a fiddle player in your ministry, you have somebody who's amazing on ukulele, or you have somebody who's, that'll kind of end. Like, I think what makes some of these groups who they are is they're playing to that, whatever that strength is,
right.
So I think if we do that,
what I'm hearing correctly. So, I mean, because we have a multitude of different types of talent, you know what I mean? We have some people who, hey, you're really talented and you're also doing a lot. Remember, you're with the whole band. So back it off just a bit. And we have some people where I'm like, did you learn the part? You know what I mean? still working with like, you know what I mean? I have this one guy who, God bless him, I love him so much, but like he always, like, he's the keys player, but I have to call him every week that he serves when he plays keys, because I'm like, don't learn the horn part. Don't play the horn part on the keys. Don't do it. Like I'll, if it's a big enough horn part and it's not distracting, I'm going to track it in. And I don't want you playing the horns. Can we focus on you playing the keys? Because then he'll mess up on the keys because he's trying to play the key. He's trying to play the horn part on his right hand, and it just it's like, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? But he'll come with his own ideas. And so I try to find ways. I've actually found now he's got a good enough voice to be a worship leader, and we've trained him up to be a worship leader, which is great. But it's interesting. Yeah, we have people who are good at certain things, and I love that call to just find people's strengths, and which means I think that, you're going to have some services that look a certain way that celebrate a certain style, and some services that don't, and some services like this is going to feel more contemporary.
Right.
So
exactly.
Yeah, that's just a really good
And it's part of the fun. Like I think like I really pay attention to like variety shows, like the Christmas, like Christmas show, like the things that are, or even like Super Bowl things, but like something in culture where they are trying to, the Grammys or, something that is trying to pull in all these different things and still make it one cohesive whole and go, okay, how can we do that in the church? How can we kind of cater to these? And there's certain things we just can't do. Like we can't do full, in my group, we can't do full on gospel because we just don't have the chops. We don't have the drummer for it. We don't have the bass player for it. We don't have we can't, but, and I can't play like true gospel keys, but I can do Israel gospel, or I can do, I can do certain things that are gospel-y, gospel light, or I can do Every Praise, I can do that, like there's songs that are simple that I can do, but so like still be us, but try to nod to these different things that we're trying to serve up to people, but enjoying it. Like, I think that's the thing, is enjoying that. Like I said about giving to the congregation, same thing with our team, like enjoying celebrating these people, that we have, like celebrate them for who they are. Yeah. This drummer can't play with a track. Okay. So, and that would just frustrate me, but it's like, okay, well, if you can't play with the track and it's this long, and he's tried, he's taking lessons, or like, okay, well, don't play with the track that week, and you don't have to use them necessarily, but if you do want to use them, then like, and he has something to bring, then like, okay, set it up to kind of like celebrate him. Not that you're, it's all about Jesus. It's all about worship, but you're like putting him in a good space to do what he does. You know what I mean? So I think that's, again, it is kind of an art form of figuring out how to like kind of put people in the right zone. And that's the thing I kind of mess up with sometimes, is like thinking somebody can do something like a harmony part, and then they botch it. And then I listen back and I'm like, oh man, I thought they had that, whatever. So, but right. Continue to grow and learn. So
yeah, I love that. Man, this is a whole plethora of things where I'm learning, and I appreciate all your wisdom in this. And I guess we're all kind of on the frontier of our family of churches trying to figure out how to do it all. I think my AirPods might be dying.
Yeah, I gotta let you go. I've taken a lot of your time, and I appreciate the conversation, and I hope we can do it again.
This is awesome. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to continue talking, and maybe I'll send you some examples of stuff we did, and I'd love some help or criticism, and keep moving forward. So, well, I learned from you too, and you sing the way that I wish I could sing, or maybe the way I'll sing in heaven. You're incredibly gifted, and I really appreciate how you're pouring yourself out for the Lord. But I'll hit you up later about All Hail King Jesus. I love it. But
I'll send you the second verse that we landed on right now.
Okay.
The whole song's kind of up in the air. I feel like it's on the tipping point of like, I think we've almost got it. So
it's a great song. I love it. I love the feel of it. I love the worshipful nature of it. I like that. What I was going to say just quickly on the second verse idea, like it's kind of, well, there's two things. So one, when I'm writing a song, I like to, and I'm trying to figure out the verses or the bridge, or, used to be, most of my older songs were hymn form. So it's like, you have all these verses and then the chorus, but I would write a few sentences of prose for each verse of just what am I wanting to say in this verse. So it doesn't end up being just driven by a rhyme or by something that it sounds, but it's like, no, I'm really saying something different in each verse. So it helps to write a paragraph or a thought. What am I trying to say in that verse?
That's great.
But then and then I love just using scripture and just letting the scripture do it. Cause then you can just go, okay, well, that says that in that part of the verse and says that in that part of the verse. And so it's almost like a textual sermon. You're just pulling out different parts of the scripture. So sometimes I'll do that. But in this specific song, it is such a cool rhyme you have in that first verse of, if I could picture how your scripture describes how it will be. What I wanted to hear, and maybe this isn't the direction you went, but I wanted to hear in the second verse, like a return to that form, that like same thing, but like with different words, like,
that's what
kind of
Actually,
if I could blah blah blah, you know, and another rhyme that's really similar, you know.
Yeah, we so currently, I'll leave you this. We wanted to follow that AAB,
Yeah,
CCB, which is what that rhyme scheme is.
yeah.
So it's if I could picture the way your scriptures describe, and then we changed it to how heaven will be.
Oh,
I
yeah.
would see a million angels falling at your feet. And then the verse 2, after the whole chorus, pre-chorus, whatever. Verse 2, the idea so far is this new kingdom is his vision. It's a soft rhyme.
Okay.
This new kingdom is his vision. You know,
yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, yeah. That's good.
John, when you sing it, a people born of love. And where there's grace, oh, there is freedom. We're living for the day he comes.
That's awesome. Yeah. Same idea. Yeah. I wrote down just kind of a throwaway line, but I just put, what would it take to truly thank you for all you've done for me? You know, something like that. That's like that same kind of thing. But I like that vision kingdom loose rhyme is great, but cool. Well, I want to hear all your new songs and I want to sing them all. And so let's do another interview and you can share them.
I love that. Yeah. And if you get a chance to, if you're thinking about it, the style, I never really sent this along with the text and the audio that I sent. That was just a piano and guitar, but the theme, the kind of the feel of that song, he was playing really lightly, but it's supposed to kind of open up like, you know, it's supposed to be huge guitar synth, big simple to beat right at the top. Cool. So as you're listening to it, I know the version I sent you was like very light piano. We were still trying.
That's good too. Yeah.
So yeah, that's good. It's supposed to be an epic depiction of heaven. So I'd love to send it your way and get some criticism. And who knows? Yeah, there could be something really cool here. So I appreciate your thoughts.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for taking all this time. And I know it'll bless everybody who listens to this. And thank you for all the work you're doing there. And I know we used a couple of your videos, and I know that people all over were using your videos during COVID and stuff too. So thanks for all the time that you put into those, and look forward to hearing more of the San Antonio songs. And do you have a name for your, like, what you're going to release the worship music under? Is it going to be Mission Point Worship or something?
Yeah, like Mission Worship or Mission Point Worship or something like that, or maybe just something completely different. Who knows? We're not really there yet. We're not where Broward's at, where they're like releasing stuff. So we first got to figure out who's in the core group of people within Mission Point who are actually dedicated to that, because we have a huge worship team now. So it's not like, you know what I mean?
Sometimes it works better too to like write the songs and then start using them for a while before you like record them, because what's happened to me many times is, like, a lot of my songs I recorded just for the purpose of sharing, and so I wasn't even going for a great recording, but then it becomes like such a better piece later, you know, that I've written. I mean, that the way that we sing it than what I recorded it. So, you know, so you
That's
might.
Amazing. I completely agree with you on that. That's exactly what we want. So
that's good. All right. Well, awesome. Send me your demo versions though, because we'll sing them and we'll send you our versions so you can.
I love that. How we do it. Yeah, I'd love that. Awesome. Well, dude, I'll let you go. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Joshua. Talk to you later.